Welcome to Queen's Bench, the podcast where we explore the remarkable journeys of legal luminaries. I'm Mukhindi, and with my co-host Alex Beauchamp, we have the pleasure of introducing you to Michael Whitcombe, a titan in the legal world whose career trajectory is nothing short of inspiring. He is a senior partner in M&A at McMillan with over 40 years of experience. Michael has cemented his reputation as a visionary in the legal arena. He was one of the first lawyers with a specialty in private equity law in Canada, making him a sought-after advisor and strategist for the biggest national and international deals that arise. He is especially involved in the automotive industries, where he has done deals with Porsche and Lamborghini, to name a couple. He earned his LLM from Osgood, but he is a proud graduate of Queen's Law. His dedication to his alma mater is unwavering. Not only has he walked the halls of academia, but he's also given back by teaching a coveted private equity course, guiding the next generation of legal minds towards success. But Michael's influence extends far beyond the boardroom. As an initial investor in Steam Whistle, he's discovered how to use his business acumen in independent entrepreneurial endeavors too. From navigating the complexities of building a successful law practice to balancing family dynamics with career ambitions, Michael's journey is a testament to resilience, determination, and unwavering dedication. Join us as we delve into the life and career of Michael Whitcombe, a true luminary in the legal profession. Welcome to Queen's Bench, where the stories of great legal minds come to life.
Welcome to the Queen's Bench podcast. Before we jump in, be sure to check us out on our website at queensbench.ca and make sure to follow us on all of your favorite social media and audio platforms. Now let's get started.
If you could just tell us and the audience a little bit about your background, how you ended up getting into law, why you chose Queens, that kind of thing.
So I grew up between Montreal and Toronto, and my dad worked for the railroad. We used to move back and forth somewhat regularly. And when I was 15 years old, my dad came home one day and said, "We're moving." And we were living in Oakville, and we all assumed we were going back to Montreal. He says, "We're going to Moncton." I'm like, "Where's that?" So I ended up going to high school in a little town called Riverview, New Brunswick, which is across the river from Moncton. It was actually, you look back on your life events, and it was something that was a tough thing to do going into, basically I started high school, I was going into grade 10, but it was something that really helped shape me in terms of understanding that there are things, outside living in a major metropolitan city that, are beneficial. So I end up with grade 12 New Brunswick High School at a time when there was still grade 13 Ontario. And I applied to university, and I was going to be an engineer.
Oh, wow.
And and I got accepted into Queen's Engineering. And in September of 1978, arrived in Kingston, become a Queen's engineer.
That's crazy.
Did Frost Week, climbed the grease pole. In the middle of Frost Week, I got a hand-delivered letter to my office from the dean, welcoming me to Queen's, but also saying, because you're from out of province, we need to, understand your proficiency in basic sciences.
Oh, you're kidding.
And I'm like, okay. Report to what was then Jock Hardy Arena, which was a hockey rink on campus on Thursday morning, bring an HB pencil, there's a test. And so I went to the hockey rink. There was about 12 of us, guys and girls from Western Canada, a couple of people from Quebec, 3 or 4 of us from Atlantic Canada. And we sit down, and there's an exam booklet on the table, and there's a proctor who says, they're turned upside down. He says, I'm going to, when I say go, turn the exam booklet over and read the instructions, and I'll take questions from the group. And then once we're through the questions, you can then start the exam. Understood? Understood. Okay. Read, turn it over. Read the questions. Any questions? I have a question. What's your question? What's this word? What's this word? CALCULAS. calculus. I'm like, yeah, what's that? It's a calculus exam. I'm like, never heard of calculus.
Oh,
grade 12 New Brunswick education. We didn't study calculus. Yeah, you're not going to do well on this test. Anyways, over the course of even though Queens was, had a system set up for kids from out of province at the time who weren't on the level playing field, the infamous Section J. I was a charter member and, continued my first term, but quickly came to the realization that I should probably think about something other than engineering. One, I got on the wrong bus and, I panicked a bit and said, I need to write this. And so I basically withdrew. I was a Christmas graduate and I went back to New Brunswick. I said, I got this in Brunswick High School education. I might as well use it. So I enrolled at the University of New Brunswick, where my sister was going at the time, in the Faculty of Business Administration, thinking, if it wasn't sciences, maybe I should try business. And so then put my head down and said, I've had my mulligan in terms of university, better get to it. Worked hard, was able to graduate within 3.5 years, so graduate on time. During that time, my parents had moved from Moncton back to Montreal, which is where the railway's headquarters was. And I had spent the summer after I finished high school laying railway track out in the bush. And then, I was looking for a, quote, office job, and I was hired as an office intern into Via Rail's corporate development office, so Via Rail had just been established in 1978 to take over passenger rail in Canada. Corporate development office was where they ran major projects. And so at the time they were buying new train sets. So the LRC trains that still travel back and forth between Toronto and Montreal now were just being purchased, and they were renovating all the major railway stations across the country that took passenger service. They were developing a new automated reservation system. At that point in time, if you wanted a ticket on a plane or a train, you went to a ticket agent and bought it. They were establishing something that was called at the time Reservia, which was this crazy idea that you would actually be able to use a computer to book an airplane ticket. So all these things were happening. So in the project office was a whole bunch of engineers, of which I was not. And I was the first summer intern. I'm the kid who's going to business school. What do you need help with? And there was a gentleman who was just, wonderful gentleman, very sophisticated, who had a lot of grace and class, who was a foreign trained lawyer who had come to Montreal for family reasons. Both his first 2 children were born blind. There were no schools for the blind where he came from. And so he just walked away from everything he had, came to Montreal so he could get his kids what they needed. And he was the manager of contracts, which was a job which he was overqualified for, but that's the job he had. And I convinced some of this. There was this wonderful new thing called a word processor, which literally looked like a big egg that you went into with a desk, and there was a keyboard and a little, probably 10-inch screen that had, green LED.
Yeah. So what year is this?
This is 1979.
Okay.
And I essentially bribed one of the secretaries to teach me how to use it, because I thought it would be useful. Not that I had taken one computer course when I was in engineering, literally punching key cards, but this thing looked interesting. And so I did know how to type. And so I was, starting to use this to write letters to my then girlfriend. And this lawyer saw me using it, and he didn't have the secretarial support that he needed. So he said, "Do you know how to use this thing?" "Yeah." "Do you mind working on my contracts?" "Sure."
Wow.
"Why not?" So I was his typist, but I'm typing his contracts. And then, he just kept giving me more work, and he kept saying, well, why don't you create a contract database, which consisted literally of taking a whole bunch of contracts and cutting with scissors, particular clauses, and making a binder that had, pricing clauses and, various different, resource. That was legal, knowledge management circa 1979.
The bane of every contracts professor.
So I went back to business school, and in the course of business school, I really enjoyed business school and studying business. I had a tough time. I was thinking that the funnel, would eventually narrow and something would come out the other end and say, this is what you're going to do in the business world.
But so working with that guy, the light bulb didn't go off that you wanted to be a lawyer just yet?
Not initially.
Okay.
Because I'm in business school,
not
in law school. And so, and in business school, I'm like, well, it was a process of elimination. Well, I know I don't want to be an accountant, and I'm not creative enough to be a marketing person. And HR sounds like it would be a horrible thing to get into because you're going to deal with people's feelings. And so, anyways, I kept progressing through, and I did fine and everything. And finance was probably the area that I most related to. Although, understanding, I had no real idea what a degree in finance would look like back at the time. But this, particular lawyer, Alejandro was his name, asked the next summer. I reapplied for my job, and they said, we'd love to have you back. And they said, Alejandro would like you to work exclusively for him. And I'm like, wow. Okay, that's good. And then he would interact with the in-house legal department at Via Rail. So I'd be back and forth, running contracts over, and, and then the lawyers, it was actually the lawyers, because Alejandro had never gone through the Canadian legal system and didn't really know anything about it. But it was the lawyers in the in-house legal department that after a while kind of said, are you in law school? Like, no, I'm in business school. Oh. Did you ever think about going to law school? So I don't know the first thing about it. Never thought about it. Had no lawyers in the family. Wouldn't know where to start. And so they're like, well, you should think about it. And I'm like, okay. So when I went back to school that year, so this would be starting my third year, I went down to the bookstore on campus, and there was a book. The title was How to Become a Lawyer in Canada. I'm like, that's what I need. It was basically a compendium of all the addresses of registers of admission for various, law schools across the country, but started reading the book. Okay, you got to write the LSAT. Oh, okay, what's that? And so again, there's no internet to find anything, right? Like your resources are quite limited, but there was in this book, there was the address that you write away in order to sign up to write the LSAT.
Back then, was the LSAT something people studied for in advance? Nowadays, you have LSAC who governs the LSAT, and they record all their stats for how many study hours everyone does. But back then, was it something that you just sort of dove into blindly?
No. So there were study guides. There were prep guides for how to prepare for the LSAT that had practice exams in them. That was it. There weren't, where I was anyways, there weren't any courses offered in terms of, how to attack this thing. Okay. So I, decided that in my, as soon as I got back to school, starting my fourth year, that I would write there was a sitting in September. So I was prepared during the course of the summer, wrote that exam, got my result. I did well enough. Okay. Can't remember what it was, but it was, it wasn't 99th percentile, but, I did fine, although I didn't really know whether it was fine or not because they weren't publishing these stats. But I applied myself in school and was, essentially, had a very, very strong transcript. And so then it's like, okay, so I started applying to law schools and sent off, the applications, basically cover my bets because I should back up. So I'm a late boomer. Okay. So I was born in 1960. So a late boomer is somebody who has gone through life where the baby boomers ahead of you, not that they got everything, but they basically got everything. So,
you were less spoiled.
We're repopulating the world. We need to, build new schools so that we have fresh new schools for these people. And so boomers got new schools. And then when it gets to the late boomers, it's like those new schools are all crowded and we don't have any room for money to build new ones. Let's put a portable in the parking lot. Yeah. You can sit there with your coat on during the winter.
That was me.
Yeah, we had that.
So anyway, coming back to it, I sent out my applications, assuming that maybe one school might want to bite. And UNB actually has one of the second oldest law schools. It's the second oldest university in North America, and it actually has an old law school and a good name in the Atlantic Canada market. And so I applied there. But one of the first acceptances I received was from Queen's. And I looked at it and I'm like, okay, I've got some unfinished business.
Second chance.
No, I said, I know Kingston. I've experienced it. I know what it would be like. I think I want to get back to Ontario in order to, I actually thought that I would go to Queen's and not understanding how the whole legal industry worked. I go to Queen's, get my degree, and go back and work for the railroad in Montreal as a lawyer. That's how I thought this, I was projecting this out. Mm-hmm. And so, I also got, accepted at the University of Toronto, and I had no idea what the hierarchy of law schools was, right? Mm-hmm. I had heard of Osgoode. Mm-hmm. I had been told Osgoode was a really good school. I was accepted there, so fine. I got accepted. So I decided on Queen's. Mm-hmm. And so first week, Frosh week, law school, class of 85. So this is 1982. Everybody's sizing everybody up, right? So what was your LSAT score?
Yeah. We had some of that too.
I got this, whatever. And then, you asked me at the opening, why Queen's Law? Mm-hmm. Right. And so that was the question. Why'd you come to Queen's Law? 9 times out of 10, the answer was because I didn't get into U of T. Mm. And so when I first heard this, I'm like, well, I got into U of T.
Yeah. Did I make a mistake?
People would look at me like, you're either lying or you're really stupid. Mm. Yeah. And so I stopped telling people I accepted it.
I assumed you were lying.
Anyway. So that's the story of how I got to Queen's Law School. And so, I settled in. I lived in a grad res, Harkness Hall, it was called. And so it was, there was 6 law students in Harkness. One of them had done his undergrad at Queen's, but he was engaged. And so wasn't hanging around too much. And the other 4 guys and me the law school was actually under renovations at that time, building those lovely subterranean classrooms. Mm-hmm. And so the first term of law school, we were spread all over campus. And so we would wake up in the morning and somebody would pull out the schedule and say, oh, we got a class in Dunning Auditorium. I'm like, yeah, okay. I started walking, And after about the 3rd day of this, they're like, what are you, some sort of idiot savant who stays up all night to memorize the campus map? I'm like, oh, no, I went here once. I'm hoping it turns out better this time. So, so settled in and was a bit of a fish out of water. I was interested in your comment that your class is interested in corporate law because back in 1982, there was a handful, I would say 10, 15 of a class of 150 that I think probably, were interested in corporate law. Yeah. I mean, Queen's was known for its family law, its criminal law, its constitutional law. And so, people were really focused on that stuff, right? And I'm like, do I have to take criminal law? Can I, why is this required? Yeah. Anyway, so you find your people and you start hanging with some guys, and most of the people who became my roommates for 2nd and 3rd year were, although a couple of them ended up being litigators, they all came to Bay Street to do something in the business law realm.
Did you guys have a house? Whereabouts did you live with your friends?
486 Johnson.
Okay. So not far from where I was in Brock Towers, I don't think.
Yeah. So we got that house for our 2nd year, and 6 of us moved in. Unbeknownst to us, we subletted to a group of girls for the summer before, who, we didn't realize had a couple of dogs.
Oh, no.
And so, over the course of the summer, anyways, I guess these dogs lived in the house, and we went back to, to Frost Week, and they had moved out, and they had taken everything with them except for the fleas.
Oh, no.
And we had this great, welcome to 486 Johnson party, and invited the whole class, and everybody showed up. It was a hot summer night, and everybody's wearing shorts. And then the next day, everybody's walking around scratching themselves, putting ointment on their legs, and they're like, we're never going back to that.
Disaster.
We recovered.
Yeah. So at this point, I assume you're fully on the path towards being a corporate lawyer. But before you speak about becoming a prominent partner at McMillan, was there ever anything else in the back of your mind that you considered doing? If it or even alternatively, if it wasn't law, what do you think it would have been?
So, I actually my life plan, my master plan, was, as I had gotten through business school. I mean, I did, particularly in the upper years, and taking strategy courses and things that really caught my interest. I'm like, okay, I mean, I do like business, and so my initial plan was go get a job and then go back, work for the railroad. I was really in the back of my mind thinking, depending upon, well, again, backing up, it was, first year, I don't know what class it was, but somebody said there's 2 different legal systems in Canada. I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, and it was common law and civil law. Okay. Yeah, civil law is in Quebec. But that's where I'm going to go work.
Yeah.
They're like, well, you're at the wrong law school. Right? You need to go to a school in Quebec to study civil law.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so I guess I'm not going back to work in Quebec.
Yeah.
And so then I started thinking, okay, well, again, there was a couple of people in the class who's had fathers who were Bay Street lawyers, who had the inside track and knowledge, shared some of it with us about how this might work to the extent they really understood it themselves. And so it was, okay, I'll go article and I'll get qualified. But, what I thought then was I would work, get my qualification and then go do an international MBA. So that that became my plan, was that I written away and got the application packages for INSEAD and IMD and London Business School. And I'm like, I'm going to go to one of those.
Yeah.
Then basically round out my education that way. And then, because it would be an adventure, and these were the best business schools.
We just went through the recruit process in November. Is that how you came to McMillan back then for articling, or how did you end up at McMillan?
So recruits were done at the end of for Toronto, the Bay Street recruit was done in August.
Okay.
Just before you started your third year.
Yeah.
So the system was much, to me, better, because you had a 2-year body of work of your law school experience. Yeah. Okay. First year is prescribed. You're getting introduced to a new information, the new way of grading, probably not used to 100% finals. Yeah. And your curriculum is prescribed. Whether you want to take criminal law or not, you have to take it, right? And so, to me, first year law school is a crapshoot as to how readily you adapt to all this new stuff.
Yeah.
At least we had the benefit of survive first year. Second year, you can take some courses that you think you're interested in, depending upon your ballot number, if you got them. But I was able to take business associations and securities law and commercial law, things like I connected with, right? If I had been hired, if I was applying for a job based upon my first year marks, which were fine, but they weren't, going to have anybody say, we need that guy. Whereas after my second year, I basically caught some interest because I, got some A's in some tough business law courses. And so people are like, okay, well, that's what we do here. Yeah. And you seem to be proficient in it. So, so the dots connected for me.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so in terms of recruiting, so the Western Canadian firms actually came to campus in February of, so our Bay Street was August. So February, March, they came in and you could sign up. Because I didn't really, again, I was living in Montreal in the summertime. I was a free agent. I didn't, I wasn't connected to Toronto. I said, one of my roommates was from Calgary. And he was applying for these interviews. And I said, you know what? Maybe I'll sign up. Like Calgary was, my father was encouraging me to look west because the West was, starting a boom cycle. And so, I applied, had a couple of interviews, and got a couple of offers.
Wow.
And then I'm like, okay.
Hard to turn down.
Well, so you got a bird in the hand, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, and then it's, they're like, well, we'd like to know.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, but I might go to Toronto. And they're like, well, I have to decide now.
Yeah.
Well, I had 3 offers. 2 of them said, you know what? You've got until Friday to tell us yes or no.
Mm-hmm.
The third one said, you know what? You go do your Toronto thing. We don't want you unless you really want to come. But if it doesn't work out for you, we'll keep this open.
Wow.
We'll take you. And I said, okay, well, at least I knew I had a backup plan.
Yeah.
And so that, relieved some of the pressure. So we all, notwithstanding, everybody thinks they're under the most pressure ever, right? But you all go through it to a certain degree.
You said you grew up in part in Oakville. Did you know you already liked Toronto at least?
I mean, I had a familiarity with it, yes. Toronto then was very different than Toronto now.
Yeah.
Okay. When I grew up between 1968 and 1975, in Oakville, it was a nice, sleepy little town, population 35,000 people. Right?
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, and Toronto was...
That's almost unbelievable now.
Toronto, a place where you'd come into and maybe go to a Leaf game once or twice a season, and there were no Blue Jays, there was no CN. Well, maybe the CN Tower is just being built anyway. But when I looked at it, I had an older sister who was here, who was working, she nursed at sick kids for 30, 35 years.
Wow.
Her husband was with her, who was, who I enjoyed spending time with. I knew my parents, when my father retired from the railroad, I knew he was moving back to Oakville. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I knew this is where the family was going to be.
Yeah.
And so that, was one of the reasons. And I didn't really know enough, that looking back now, the type of law I practice, you really, if you want to practice at the highest level, it's got to be in Toronto.
Yeah.
And again, maybe that wasn't quite the case back then.
Mm-hmm.
Montreal, like 40 years ago, Montreal was the financial center for Canada. Montreal Stock Exchange was probably the preeminent stock exchange. Toronto was second. Corporate headquarters were all in Montreal. And then everything changed and everything moved to Toronto. So it was just starting to come up.
But you saw that happening?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I did. It was just happening.
Yeah.
Right? And I just happened to slide it. I knew I couldn't go to Quebec because I didn't have a civil law degree and I don't speak French.
Yeah.
So, it really was, you're going to Toronto or you're going to Calgary.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I always looked a bit weird in cowboy boots and pinched my toes. So anyway.
You never thought about going back to New Brunswick?
No.
Why is that?
Not out of, I enjoyed my time there, but I just felt like I just felt because my family had all left, there was nothing for me there.
See,
I still had, I had friends that I'd made in high school. I still have some very close friends who I go and visit and come visit me who are based in New Brunswick, but I just didn't see, in terms of opportunity, if I wanted to be a general practitioner, that's pretty much what you're going to be, right? Mm-hmm. So it would be hard to be a dedicated, business lawyer in New Brunswick.
Okay, so you're at McMillan now, you're articling, and then when do you settle on M&A specifically? Obviously, you want to do business, but why M&A?
Yeah. So let's before we get there, let's talk about what type of lawyer I really am.
Okay.
And how you put labels on people. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And how you label yourself in this profession. Okay. Because so I was at a retreat last week in the States for a legal team for a new public company that just spun out of another public company that I had acted for. And the general counsel, roughly a little bit older than me, but roughly same demographic, got up and introduced himself to the group. And he had worked in various huge U.S. law firms and then gone in-house. But he described himself as a businessman with a law degree. And I just smiled at myself because that's the way I've been describing myself for many years.
Yeah.
Is that I am a business person who happens to have a specialty, in legal matters.
Mhm.
And so, in terms of when I started at the firm, there was, law firms are structured generally amongst practice areas.
Mhm.
So you're a litigator, you're an employment lawyer, maybe employment litigation are together in a practice group because there's crossover. We had real estate lawyers, we had banking lawyers, we had securities lawyers, which you now call public markets lawyers, and we had a business law group.
Mhm.
So just probably when I started, I refer to it as the dawn of the era of specialization in law, because 10 years earlier to me starting, you're either a litigator or you were, a business lawyer.
Yeah.
And that business lawyer might, on any given day, draft a mortgage for the Royal Bank, be involved in selling a business, negotiate a joint venture. Like, you weren't as compartmentalized.
Yeah.
Is that business lawyers, even big firms, were generalists, okay, who did lots of things. As firms got bigger, as more firms came into the market and started competing with each other, people said, well, let's compete on specialty. Let's tell the market that we are the best firm. If you have a public markets problem, you want to do an IPO, come to us. You got a bank, you're a new bank coming into the marketplace. We want to have the preeminent banking law firm. As opposed to having a group of people who dabble in it, let's consolidate and get a group of people who focus on it. So that's what was happening, when I came through. And so, when I actually joined McMillan, I was hired, I think, on the expectation that I would become a public markets lawyer, because I had this A in securities law on my transcript, the one shining beacon. And McMillan was trying to get itself, established in this area. And they were committed to a couple of young people who were lateral recruits to come in and build that up. And so, so then I came, and the way the Articlean year worked, was a full 12 months, although we did get 4 weeks vacation. And when you first started, I started in May, and it was like a formal rotation started in September. So I started in June. So from June until September, I was a free agent, but I spent all my time working for the securities lawyers.
Yeah.
And then my first 3-month rotation, I started in securities. So the first 6 months I spent on site, I spent doing nothing but securities work. Okay. And at the end of that, I'm like, I really don't like this.
Really?
It's not that it's not that I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But it's like, I'm not really sure, this is what I want to do, because it was transactional, fine. But there's no continuity. So somebody come in, they needed to raise 150,000, 1.5 million, 15 million, 150 million, whatever. You raised the money, and then they took the money, and then you went on to the next one. And so you'd learn a bit about the company, but then you'd wonder, what did they ever do with that, right?
Yeah.
And so, so I'm like, okay, so thinking back to what I enjoyed about business and working with business people and developing, learning about the business and that, it wasn't until I got to my very last rotation, which was corporate. I ended up having to do, I was told to do litigation after, my corporate rotation, and which I survived. And I remember my review at the end of that, that rotation, and I was basically told, well, it's obvious you're not going to be a litigator. Good luck with your final rotation.
Well, so why was that? Why did you or whoever rule out litigation? Was it just interest driven, or?
Yeah, like there was nothing about litigation that attracted me.
Okay.
Okay. My most painful experience in law school was the mandatory moot.
Okay.
It was mandatory. Wow.
It was
not mandatory.
There was a mandatory moot, and I'm like, there's all this court stuff.
Yeah.
And again, that's why I mainly I questioned, am I even in the right thing? If law is about courtrooms and fighting, and oral advocacy, and being persuasive. I mean, I can negotiate, and that's fine, but I really don't have a lot of time for the procedural formality,
Yeah.
and I would be frustrated with the pace at which things move.
Yeah.
Right?
It's still frustrating today.
Well, maybe more so, to tell you the truth.
During my articling year, I was handed a file and basically said, your own file, your own claim.
Yeah.
And I said, give it to somebody who wants to do this. And they're like, no, this is great. This is a great experience for you. I'm like, no, I really, they're like, no, you have to do it. I said, okay, fine, I'll do it. So I studied the file. It was a wrongful dismissal case. I studied the law, and I said, we're going to lose. No, we're not going to lose. Like, we've promised the client we're going to win. Why'd you do that? Like, you're going to lose. Nope. I go to a pretrial conference, and the judge says, you're going to lose. You should settle this. Go back and tell the lawyer who's assigned it to me, the pretrial judge doesn't like our case either.
Yeah.
Anyways, like at the end of the day, I managed to get more damages awarded that were claimed and double cost awarded against us.
Well, so maybe you missed your calling then.
Yeah, I didn't miss my calling. That cemented it for me. So, but then my final rotation, I go into corporate, and I'm like, this is where I want to be.
Yeah.
This is where you get continuity with clients. This is where you work with them. They call you every day with a new matter. And that you need to have a very broad range. When I describe, what type of practice you want to develop, if you want to be a tax lawyer, you need to immerse yourself in tax, and you need to understand that tax act. So it's very narrow and deep, but you go really, really deep. You want to be a securities lawyer, you got to go pretty deep in terms of understanding the regs. Yeah. On any given day, I get a business law lawyer who has a much broader but narrower depth. So I can learn everything I need to know about joint ventures, about franchise, dealership distribution agreements, like across a broad realm that I can talk knowledgeably when a matter comes in. And I can also know enough about antitrust regulation when we need it. I know enough about tax to be able to identify issues so that I can be the intake person on these things and, win the client's trust, knowing that when I need it, I go and get the specialist. Yeah. And I said, that's the type, if I'm going to stay in this industry, that's the type of practice I want to have. Yeah. I figured my chances of getting hired were zero because I had overinvested in the public markets group, but the firm, in their wisdom, basically figured out the available pieces, and they said to me, my hire back interview, well, we get good news and bad news. I said, the bad news is we can't give you securities as your first choice. Okay. So the good news is there's a place in corporate. And I'm like, oh, okay.
So good news only.
Anyway. And again, I thought that I would come and do it for a couple of years, and then I would go and do my international MBA. I talked about this so much that I, developed a good friend who, we shared an office during articles, and we became close friends. And at the end of his fourth year, he actually went off and did the international MBA because you talked about it so much. I looked into it. That looks great, and he's gone. Right? 38 years later, I'm still here.
Why didn't you go to do it?
That's a very good question. So I started looking as my career progressed. I was very fortunate to get a couple of senior lawyers who were really excellent lawyers, but even better people who took an interest in me. And they basically said, you're working hard. All I had to offer was hard work. Yeah. Right? And my mindset was, there's lots of people. I suffer from the great imposter syndrome, right? Like, I don't know how I even got into law school, let alone get a job on Bay Street. Yeah. Everybody's smarter than you. And I just assumed that, of the 8 people in our class that got hired back out of 15, that I was probably number 8. But I said to myself, they're probably all smarter, but I'm not going to get outworked. Yeah. Right. And I just put my head down and worked hard, and they saw that. They invested in it. And I started getting opportunities, which is the way this firm still works to this day, is that we give opportunities to people very early. And so 3-4 years in, I'll be sitting in a boardroom, with surrounded by, 20 senior people presenting to them, and they're listening to me, which was a bit scary, right? But then I started thinking about it, like if I went back in through the business realm and I went back and got the MBA and tried to break back in, how much time would it take me to actually get an audience like this?
Yeah.
Right? Like the legal degree validates you, right? And when you can bring the business acumen with it, which again, I didn't have it all out of the gate or even close. Just going to business school just introduces you to concepts. But by continually investing in myself, and learning about business every single day, because it's an interest and a passion, is that you become more valuable. And then I just looked at it and I said, okay, so I can see my continuing this in this, what I'm doing, and just, being able to leverage off a really good start that I got. So I started, becoming a business lawyer. Okay. And then as I mentioned, within law firms, how they're structured, practice group wise, they're also structured another way at the same time. And that is amongst industry groups.
Okay. Yeah.
So that like somebody will identify themselves, they'll say, I'm a healthcare lawyer. I'm like, okay. So, but they could be a litigator in the healthcare industry. They could be a corporate person in the healthcare industry. They could be a regulatory privacy expert in the healthcare industry. Within the law firm, they sit in the litigation group, but they present when they're trying to attract business is to professionals, people in the healthcare industry saying, we understand your business.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm an automotive lawyer. Okay. I do a lot of work in the automotive space, have my entire career. It's an interest of mine.
Yeah.
It's something that I can combine with understanding business, understanding law, understanding the issues that come up in the automotive industry, and being able to package that together. Okay. So as a young lawyer, I started as a business lawyer. The business law group did the private negotiated mergers and acquisitions transactions. The securities group did public stuff to the extent there was that. But, in the private M&A, we actually had a client who did leverage buyouts. So this is back in the mid, 80s. And this was something new. This is the time of Drexel, Burnham Lambert, and KKR, and the whole concept of a leverage buyout was just starting. So we, some venture capitalists in Canada, and I'll come back to that term in a minute, basically convinced, somebody to lend them a lot of money so that they could go and buy. They're going to do a consolidation strategy of buying up a number of chemical companies at different parts in the, in the processing chain and put it together. And so the firm was, before I got here, they were working on this, but I then got put into this group, and after a while became the main lawyer, third or fourth year lawyer, was still working with appropriate parental supervision at the partner level. But we were buying and selling businesses, and they weren't, huge transactions, but they were things I cut my teeth on. So I learned how to do this. Okay. I learned how to, basically, run a transaction, whether it was a share purchase or an asset purchase. And, that became part of what I did. In addition to being a business lawyer, need to buy a business, I know how to do that. Okay. And so for the first 15 years of my practice, that's, I did lots of different things, right? And I developed some knowledge and expertise in pharmaceutical, had the stuff in automotive, and I developed, knowledge in the franchising industry, which will become apparent as we get to a later topic. And so as things develop. Then I don't know when it was, but probably about, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. So when I was working for these venture capitalists, they were buying things in the US. So all of a sudden I was having to deal with US lawyers who were on the same side, who were, helping out doing the US acquisitions.
Yeah.
And so there was a law firm, Kirkland & Ellis, based out of Chicago, that I started working with, and I met a young lawyer there who super smart, one of the smartest guys I ever run across. His Harvard undergrad and Harvard Law School were validation of how smart the guy was. He was just a real good guy too. And so we hit it off and we bonded over, he was from Detroit and Red Wings versus Maple Leafs. And, and again, this was not at a time when you could send an email to somebody. You had to pick up a phone, and call somebody. But we got to know. And he started to rocket up in his career, and became one of the top M&A lawyers in the U.S. And so, and it's because he was respected within his firm, people would say, I got something in Canada. You know anybody? He'd say, yeah, call Mike. And so one of these calls, I got called up and said, do you do private equity work? I had never heard the term before, but I had been coached to basically say, of course we do. Send me the stuff. And so what I got sent was a letter of intent for a private M&A transaction happening in Canada. I'm like, well, yeah, I've actually been doing this.
I do this, yeah.
Yeah, I do this. Okay, I feel better now.
Why are they calling it private equity?
Because they invented the industry.
Yeah.
Because Kirkland essentially invented the industry from a legal perspective. And so all of a sudden you do one private equity deal and, then, they're like, oh, well, Mike's the private equity guy in Canada. Sure, I got one deal done. And then you do the next one. And, so private equity is the business of buying and selling businesses.
Yeah.
Okay. So you put together pools of capital who go out, who then have an investment thesis. We're going to buy particular industries, sectors, and buy low, build up the companies, ready them for sale, harvest, sell, take the proceeds, recycle. So if you want to do transactions, it's the best industry, to work in because you're constantly getting, deal flow. And I realized pretty, quickly that, okay, well, this is great because you work on an acquisition, you then become, counsel to the company during the 5 to 7 year hold period. You develop relationships with them, and then there's an exit. And if you've really done your job right, when the new owner comes in, the executives all say, oh, we like those guys over at McMillan. We want to keep them as our lawyers. So it actually helped us build both our corporate client base in addition to providing lots of great transactional work, which is not only for me as the corporate guy running the deal with a group of young associates, but also for the IP lawyers and labor and employment lawyers, and now the privacy lawyers, is that, they work, it's a team sport. We have to bring these teams together to get this done. Okay. Yeah. So that I think lays the groundwork for your question about transactions now and where we're going.
Well, I guess first speak a little bit about what is your role as legal counsel for driving a merger, for example. Like what is, when someone picks up the phone and says, hey, this is the private equity guy, what are they expecting you to do? Say, for example, raising money. What does that mean?
So there's two sides of the private equity industry. There's probably more than two sides, but there's the two sides that, are capital raising and deployment. So basically investing the money. All the work I do is on the investing the money side of things. Okay. There's not that many, there's a few, but there's not that many Canadian-based private equity firms that actually go out and raise money. Okay. There's probably about 5 lawyers in Canada who can make a living. There's some really good ones, right? Who are at, a couple other Bay Street firms who have cornered the market because they got in early. Yeah. Just like I did, on doing the deals.
The other side,
they got in early on raising the money, working with the tax guys.
Yeah.
And so they do that capital raising stuff. And there tends to be this isn't 100%, but there tends to be a differentiation between the lawyers who act for firms that raise the money versus the ones that invest the money.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's just kind of the way it's gone. Kirkland does both. They got one of the largest funds practice in the U.S., and then they have one of the largest groups that deploys money. Okay. So when I get the call, I mean, these on the private equity side of things, it's a very different experience dealing with doing an M&A transaction for a corporate client who does one every 5 years or 10 years.
Yeah.
Because you need to be much more, proactive in terms of helping them through the process.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is it explaining to them how things work?
Yeah.
Private equity guys, when they come to you, the deal is struck. Okay. Is that you are there to implement.
Yeah.
They have done their negotiation. They know what they want. They are sure before they want to, in this day and age, before they want to start spending money on lawyers, they're pretty sure that the deal is going to get done.
So have they already put the legwork in to do due diligence and that type of thing, or do they expect you to do some of that too?
Oh no. So there's different types of diligence, but there's financial diligence, which includes what they generally call a Q of E, quality of earnings analysis, to ensure that, what they think they're buying, that the numbers work.
Yeah.
That's generally done before you bring the lawyers in, because if the numbers don't work, there's no use releasing the legal hounds to go looking under rocks to see if there's, any problems.
Yeah.
Right. So, so generally speaking, but again, it also depends upon the process. When we first started doing deals, there were many what we call proprietary deals, is that, private equity guys would find deals and they'd convince, an owner that they should sell and private equity was the answer. More and more transactions are done by way of an auction process so that you don't just go, to one person and say, I want to sell my business to you.
Yeah.
Basically, you hire a banker. The banker puts together a process, and a different level of detailed information is disclosed at different stages in the process. So we may get in at an early stage in a bid and be asked to kind of just provide overall structure and advice, be able to provide some guidance on whether, and this is becoming more and more of an issue in the Canadian climate, as to whether there's going to be any regulatory concerns to getting a transaction done. You may want to do a transaction, client may want to do the transaction, but there may be reasons why, because they already are in the space, right? And that the consolidation of them with the target is going to, cause problems with the Competition Bureau or with Investment Canada. Those are the sorts of, upfront issues that we will get into identifying. And then if they, can get over those, get comfort that those are manageable risks in the transaction, then they'll proceed. If they win exclusivity on the bid, they'll proceed to say, okay, full on diligence.
Yeah.
And with the private equity buyers, because this is what they do, is buy and sell businesses. Mm-hmm. They're super sophisticated. You don't need to spend much time explaining things to them. We do need to explain Canadian stuff to them from time to time. Remind them that employment laws are different in Canada. Sometimes the tax laws work a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But, they're very quick studies on that stuff. And then, then you start going. Now, they also use insurance in these processes. So in a typical transaction, you're selling a business, you study contract law, you understand what representations and warranties are. In a purchase agreement, there'll be representations and warranties about the business.
Yeah.
One of the things that private equity uses in order to, make themselves more attractive to somebody selling is to say, we'll need representations and warranties from you, but in terms of recourse, we will get this underwritten by an insurance company. We'll have an insurance policy that basically stands behind your reps and wars. As long as there's no fraud here, if you make a mistake, we'll go to insurance. We won't be asking for our money back.
Okay.
And that's something that, started in the US. We started seeing it move into Canada 10 plus years ago. And now it's part of most transactions that we do in private equity. But then as you're doing the diligence on the target, you have to bear two things in mind. You have to understand, you're finding, you're doing it to a certain level, and you have to establish scopes, materiality levels, this sort of stuff. But you also have to understand what the rep and warranty insurer wants. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, you do an underwriting call, And it's a lot of fun when they start looking at you saying, well, why didn't you ask this question? Why didn't you ask that question? Anyway, we're good at it, and we know what we're doing, and we can manage that process.
Yeah. So by the time they come to you, these big giants, you said the deal's already in place. So do you have a role in negotiating different things related to representations and warranties, for example? Or
So, I mean, the deal fabric is in place, okay? In terms of, is this an asset purchase or a share purchase? What's the price?
Yeah.
What's the indemnification package look like? Is it a rep and warranty insured deal or not? Letter of intent is going to be 3 or 4 pages long.
Yeah.
Okay. Then we take that and your purchase agreement is going to be 65 to 80 pages long.
Yeah.
That's where we come in. Okay. And we make sure that the purchase agreement reflects, the structure of the deal, unless we find something along the way, which suggests there needs to be a deviation. And then, we do our diligence and we check and double check the disclosures, ensure that, the particular target says, well, we have, if it's a enterprise software company, we have 500 customers and they've all signed, evergreen contracts, and so you go through your process of validating, taking a representative sample, validating the fact that there are contracts and that they are evergreen and that they will survive the change of control transaction. And, there's lots of things to think about, but that's what we get paid to do.
From the negotiation side of things, this is something I'm personally very interested in. I'm in a negotiations course now. Are there strategies that you personally employ as winning strategies per se, or like is there a method that is reliable for you every time you do need to negotiate any part of the contract?
No, because every negotiation is different. And if we are negotiating, an acquisition, and you said, big, these aren't all big. I mean, some of these transactions we're negotiating are $25 million. Some of them are, $5 billion.
Yeah.
Okay. Most of them are between, in terms of enterprise value, $75 and $250 million.
Yeah.
The amount of work that goes into those, doesn't increase exponentially. It's, in fact, the larger the transaction, like the whole materiality issue, kind of disappears because people will say, you're paying me $250 million. What's it really matter whether or not, the HVAC, system needs to be replaced in a year or not, right? Okay. Yeah. So, and it all depends upon who's on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you're negotiating with another, established Bay Street firm who does this for a living, you don't fight about stuff, right? Like you just, what the purchase agreement is going to look like when it comes across. And there's, so you know that there's 3 or 4 things that we need to negotiate.
Yeah.
And you deploy your strategy, you basically, to me, the key thing in negotiation is don't negotiate incrementally. Don't do one issue at a time because you'll always settle on the lowest common denominator. You just, you look at it, you prepare your issues list, you have your bucket of issues, you negotiate things, for a universal resolution of all these things, saying we will give you this, but we need that.
Yeah.
And so don't say we gave you that until we get this.
Yeah.
Right? You'll also end up in situations where, targets have longstanding clients who, maybe should be bringing in M&A counsel and they don't.
Yeah.
And they want to do it themselves. And that can add a lot of cost and expense because you're fighting over things. I once had a transaction where, the lawyer on the other side sent me back the draft purchase agreement with all the reps and warranties struck out. We're not guaranteeing anything. I'm like, well, then you're not getting the money.
Yeah.
They're like, oh no, if he gives you this, you'll sue him. Not if they're not true. Oh, it's too risky. And I'm like, we ended up going back and basically said, you're never going to get this deal done if this guy's your lawyer. So you guys figure it out. And they did then bring in M&A counsel and things went a lot more smooth. But you never know who's going to show up on the other side. And this is, part of, again, when your experience, even on Bay Street, is some firms do more deals than others.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. and we all go to the same conferences and we all learn the same stuff. But until you actually do it and have training and are exposed to it day in, day out, like it's, your comfort in terms of dealing with risk, will be, it just improves with experience. This is an experience-based business. Yeah. I tell young lawyers, you may think it's hard, and, it's not like anything we do is from a, academic perspective, really hard to grasp. It's not advanced calculus, but there's a lot of it. And you do have to be able to, to separate the noise from what's really important very quickly and do the analysis as to what really matters from a risk perspective and educate the client on how the law works, and, the decision that needs to be made.
So you talked about how what drew you to corporate law was, more than securities, for example, was the ability to work with clients long term, or at least among many things, that was what was appealing to you. So in terms of this, I don't know if it's networking or what you would call it, but what do you do to build these lasting relationships? Or is it exclusively by referral from one good deal that you do or something like that? How exactly do you go about, I guess, the business development side of things?
Right. So, when I joined this firm, I was told from an early day by the partners who were here that, McMillan's a great platform, and like in the banking world, we act for some of the biggest banks in the world, and the banks call you up, and that's great. On the corporate side, well, we have some good corporate clients. It's not like every day, you're not acting for General Motors, and every day the phone doesn't ring at 9:00 and they say, we're sending you 15 new deals, okay? 15 new matters, right? So you need to start thinking about developing business, and so I received training in that. So from a young age, I was basically taught, how to conduct yourself, how to ask questions, how to communicate that, I'm a Bay Street lawyer, without, basically saying, I'm a Bay Street lawyer.
Yeah.
Hire me.
Yeah.
And so you develop your own style over time, and, you never know where an opportunity is going to present.
Could I ask how you would characterize your style?
I legitimately like helping people. Okay, that's part of my DNA. And so, if I can help somebody, and without, I never do it on the understanding that, or the expectation that you're going to get something back.
Yeah.
Right? But if you can help somebody solve a problem, what I do as a lawyer every day is help people solve problems. Like what's your key skill? You're a problem solver. Otherwise, why are they going to call you?
Yeah.
Right? And so, my wife will joke, I don't have any friends. I just have clients, because I have lots of clients who become friends. Right? And I'll go off to the off-leash dog park in my neighborhood with my dog for an hour. And I'll come back and my wife will say, how many new files did you get?
That's funny.
Because I'll be hanging around the dog park looking like I'm a normal guy in the neighborhood, with a dog. And there's other people hanging around, and you get talking, and, and again, I don't lead with, hey, I'm a Bay Street lawyer. You need any free advice? You just, you learn to talk to people, and you're like, oh, so what do you do?
So,
well, I run this business or that business. And the most powerful question you can ask somebody at the appropriate stage, right? Because you need to develop your knowledge and expertise before you start offering advice. But the most important, the best question I can ask somebody is, that's, if I know something about the industry, I can say, I understand this is happening. What's keeping you up at night? And I was like, data breach, cybersecurity stuff. I said, oh yeah. Yeah, I said, yeah, we got a group where I work that, specializes in that stuff. You'd be interested in getting any information? He goes, for free? Yeah, for free. Stuff. We've already got the bulletins prepared.
Yeah.
Send you stuff. They take it, and then 5 years later, they'll call you up and say, you know what, I'm thinking about selling my business. You mind, want to talk?
Yeah,
So
I see.
does it happen? Like you, Steve Jobs gave a commencement speech. It's very short, but the essence of it is you can't connect the dots looking forward.
Yeah.
So you can't say, if I go and talk to this person here now, then, I might get something out of it.
Yeah.
May not be even that person may tell somebody else at the dog park who says they got a problem. You should talk to that guy with the black standard poodle. He actually, knows a couple of things.
Yeah.
And so you said you got some training early on about how to come across that way and how to kind of build business. Was it lawyers giving this kind of training, or did they hire like professionals and some sort of psych background? Like, how did that work?
So the training I got was from a lawyer, a guy named Jim Durham, who was a lawyer, who actually had great practice. He was the lawyer to the Professional Golfers Association in the U.S. Had great stories about this. But then he realized that as a lawyer, he was really good at business development, and that he really enjoyed doing business development more than he did practicing law. Mm-hmm. So he developed this consulting business about, how to train lawyers to develop business. There's a guy named Dr. Larry Richard who wrote, so he was a lawyer who then, I guess he did his undergrad in, psychiatry, and then he went to law school, and then he became fascinated with all the people he met in law school, and then all the people he met at lawyers, fascinated in terms of their personalities and how he thought that they were all very similar. So he actually did his PhD thesis, and I may get this wrong, but this is my recollection of what I heard, there's, something like 18 different personality traits that everybody has, right? So it might be empathy, resiliency, your emotional intelligence. Yeah. And everybody's got these. And then if you test the general population, everything deviates towards the norm, right? 50th percentile. But if you take the lawyers and you test them for these 18 personality traits, that they will test as an outlier, so either top 20% or bottom 20% in something like 12 of the 18 traits. Okay? And so the theory being, to be a successful lawyer, you should fall into this classification. You should be an outlier in terms of empathy, or you should be an outlier in terms of resiliency. Mm-hmm. And so,
that's fascinating.
Yeah. Oh, it's fascinating, yeah. And then we, a couple of years ago, we used it. We used it to identify, some potential managing partners of the firm. We basically took a group of people and said, let's put them through this, and this will be one data point to help us assess, who's got the leadership abilities.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Then they decided to put us all through it.
Mm.
That's so funny.
And they put us all through it. And then we met as a group. So we met as a business law group, and they presented the findings on a chart, in a room like this. And they showed, like pretty much everybody around the table was testing where they should, right? Like as a group, like you're all over here, except there's one guy who's not. And then as a group, they're all over here, except there's one guy who's over here.
Okay. And was it different to the standard population?
Yeah. Well, it was different to what the lawyer population should be.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's McMillan's group was different to what a lawyer should be?
No.
Okay.
His group within McMillan was following the trends for the lawyer group, except for this one guy.
Yeah. No, I got that part, but I meant like because this is an independent sample outside of the research paper you talked about earlier. So I'm just curious, did McMillan's fairly representative lawyer group test differently than the standard population of just
in the same way all lawyers test?
Yeah, in the same way all lawyers.
Yes.
So you replicated the results of the study.
Yeah, except for this one guy.
Yeah.
Me.
Wait, so it wasn't anonymous?
Well, so what did it say about you?
Well, it's funny because he basically said, well, this particular guy doesn't have a hope in hell of being a business developer.
That's funny.
It's like, and then then the joke was when they finally disclosed it, they're like, actually, like, there's more than one way to do this.
Yeah.
Right. That's the learning from it, because my partner beside me, who's every bit as successful as me, who's also a Queen's Law guy who went to business school, like the two of us grew up here together, equally successful, and he's testing like he should, and I'm not, right? So you can't say there's only one way that works here.
Yeah.
So
Also, you said you're not really a lawyer, you're a business person with a law background.
he'd be the same way, right? So, but anyway, it just goes to show, like, when you get this stuff, right, you have to find, you can take all the training, that's out there. You can read all the self-help improvement books that are out there. Yeah, and they're good to do, right? Like I've read a ton of those things, and you adopt for yourself things that are going to work for yourself.
Yeah.
That's the lesson at the end of the day. There's no, one guidebook that says, read this and you will be successful, because not everybody's got a different style. And the recipients on the other side, right, of it is that not everybody warms up to me, right? People will leave after, some will leave after 5 minutes and some will stick around for 5 hours, but it's, different strokes.
Is the thing I would love to know is there a part of a deal, be it meeting the person for the first time or, I mean, any part in between, or closing a deal, is there any part that gets your blood boiling more than other times? Like, what's the thing that makes you most excited throughout a deal? Is it meeting someone and thinking about the potential to do a deal with them? Or is it when you finally help them at the end and sign the last paper that you need to sign?
Yeah, they're both, I mean, getting hired always feels good. Winning new business for me, okay? For my buddy I was just talking about. Like, that's what keeps us going day in and day out, okay? Now, full disclosure, everything I needed to know to be successful, in my career, I learned from reading the Peanuts comic strip. Okay.
That's funny.
So one of the things that I tested, like opposite everybody else on, was resiliency. Okay. Is that lawyers evidently, on average, have low resiliency.
Wow, that's shocking.
Well, I thought it was shocking too, right? Except then you think about it, it's like, you say something, they're like, "What are you talking about? I can substantiate that. Let me prove that I'm right." Right?
Yeah.
You can't just accept that. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's the Irish in me. It's like, I'll just hold a grudge, say nothing, and I'll make a marker and I'll hold a grudge until I die. And 50 years later, anyways. So when you go out and pitch, right?
Yeah.
Charlie Brown never won a game, right? But he always wanted the ball. He always wanted to get back on the mound. Because he loved the game. He loved to compete, right? And it's like, let's go out there.
Yeah.
And it's, I played a lot of baseball when I was a kid. And, to be successful in baseball, if you get a hit 3 out of 10 times, you're a superstar.
Yeah.
And I just carry that mentality through. If I win 3 out of 10 pitches for new work, I'm a superstar.
Yeah.
Whereas the younger generation
wants 100%.
Sometimes expects, better results than that.
Yeah.
And so just trying to explain to them, you're not going to win there's lots of great firms out here. And, like in terms of the ability to do the deal, anybody can do it.
Yeah.
So you're going to win it on your presentation and trying to develop that relationship with people.
Yeah.
So getting hired, is a win. But then you got to perform.
Yeah.
And so, it's exciting. The adrenaline flows through it, when you get to that closing and the money gets wired and everybody's happy. And, it actually used to be, we actually used to get together for closings. People would get in a room, and you would actually, basically see people and shake hands and pop a champagne.
That's fun.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, remember the first closing I was working on, it was this for the sale of a company that was very important to my, the senior partner who took me into his group. And so, I was in charge of organizing the paper for closing. And the last thing that went down was the check, and this was a big check. And so, it was the last thing that went on the table. The other side delivered the check over. My boss picks up the check. He looks at it and says, "That's good. Right number of zeros." Hands it to me. Get some photocopies because we need them for the closing book. I go running down out of the boardroom, down the hall, the convenience photocopier, put the check in, zip off that, pick up the photocopies, go running back into the room, put the photocopies down into the file. Where's the check? Shit. Still in the photocopier.
That's funny.
Run back to the hall, get the check.
It seems as though I've maybe wrongly characterized you as an M&A lawyer. If we're going to talk about M&A...
No, I am an M&A lawyer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where do you see M&A going in the next maybe 5 to 10 years?
So, 80% of what I do now is M&A work. So it's getting these calls from primarily these private equity firms saying, we want to buy something or we want to sell some of our holdings, usually more on the buy side. And so that's what I do.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, where is it going? Like as right now, in terms of, there's been various cycles to this industry. The way a private equity deal works is, you generally, if the purchase price is 100, then, whether that's 100,000, 100 million, the private equity firm will invest 30% as equity. It'll take money out of its fund and put it in, and it'll borrow the other 70% from banks. Okay? The theory being that you put in 30 of your own money, you borrow the 70, you pay interest on that 70, but you double or triple the value of the company, you pay off the debt. So if the 100 goes to 3, you pay off the 70 in debt, and your equity has gone from 30 to 230, right? So that's the secret sauce of private equity.
Yeah.
In the last couple of years, the cost of what they call leverage, which is the borrowing, has increased significantly. And what that has done is it's caused deal size to get smaller because people just don't want to borrow that much debt and pay that much interest. And so it is impacting the size of transactions that are being done. But, there's still, in terms of frequency, there's still a lot of deals being done. Yeah. Canada is ripe. A lot of the M&A I do is in the tech space, because Canada has, for decades been known to be, a place where software gets developed. Yeah. We had, first of all, the implosion of Nortel that put a lot of people out of work, but also spawned a lot of entrepreneurs basically starting new, companies like BlackBerry. And then when BlackBerry blew up, same thing. So you have a lot of, new startup companies that are just kind of getting to the point where they have recurring revenue. I used the term venture capitalist earlier, and, private equity and venture capitalist are two different things. Venture capital are people who take bets on startup companies and expect that 9 out of 10 will fail and that they'll lose, their investment will go to 0, but on that one that hits, it'll go to, a big number.
Yeah.
Private equity isn't making bets like that. They're taking institutional capital that is expecting to double or triple their money, so they're not making those bets. They buy companies which are more mature, established recurring revenue. And so there's these, there's trillions of dollars invested in these private equity firms that, need to deploy the capital. So, there's going to continue, there's an industry there that's just going to continue on, and people are going to buy things and people are going to sell things. Yeah. There's an adjustment going on, is that, there's the value expectations that people have, is that, there's a concept called industry multiples, which is the, generally the way you value a business is you figure out what its EBITDA is, your earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, financial term, and that you multiply a industry multiple to it. So there's, people who keep track of this, that, commodity chemical companies are selling at 4 times EBITDA or 7 times, whatever it is. Enterprise software companies are selling at 10 times or 12 times, okay? And so that's generally how valuations come about. And so these multiples go up and down. And of course, when somebody owns one of these companies and wants to sell, if they hear that, they sell between 7 and 10 times, they think they should get 10.
Yeah.
10 times out of 10.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes there's a value, a gap between what buyers are willing to pay. Obviously, private equity buyers want to buy as low as they can so that they can maximize the return. So you have to find the sweet spot. When you do an IPO, usually the valuations for an IPO are, maybe double, triple the valuations for a private sale.
Yeah.
Now it's a more difficult process. I mean, it's a process that doesn't necessarily provide liquidity to you. So if I own a business and I want to IPO it tomorrow, I'm not going to be selling 100%. I might be selling 20% of my so I'll get some money, and that probably the people who are investing in the company are probably expecting that new money that they're putting in is going to be invested in the company and make the company bigger. Yeah. So if I'm looking to sell out my interest, necessarily IPO is not necessarily the way I'm going to go. Plus, I got to stay involved, right? So, in terms of, there was an article written on LinkedIn a week or two ago by a guy named Clay Horner, who was probably one of the best M&A lawyers ever in Canada. He's retired from Osler's, and he was lamenting the future of M&A in Canada, but mainly on the public side.
Yeah.
Basically saying that there's just not other than the pension funds, large pools of capital that are able to do transactions. The pension funds themselves, which are very key players in terms of having these capital pools, but they are often looking outside Canada to get the best returns and the best opportunities because Canada is small on the global stage. Right? Mm-hmm. So in terms of the opportunities to be done here, if there's always going to be work for people in both sectors. Yeah. But I hitched my wagon to the private sector just because it was of more interest to me. And I just find that you get to, have that, more continuity with it. And I, have every expectation that, that we're going to continue to need, transaction lawyers to continue to do transactions, whether or not they're for private equity firms or strategics who are trying to grow. Because there's always going to be people who own a business and build it up, and then it's time to retire and sell it off.
Yeah. As a business person who does law, has engaging with these small, medium, and large companies and whoever else helped inform about your own private endeavors, entrepreneurial endeavors, and if so, how?
Yeah. So it's a good question. So, so the first event I ever went to at McMillan was called the Flyback Dinner. And so we were in third year law school, and McMillan called up and said, "Hey, come to Toronto. We're going to have a nice party so you can meet the other, all 15 people in your articling class." And so we went to a dinner at a nice private club, and there was a very engaging partner, very large personality, named John Craig, and he, he's just a very fun guy to be with. Yeah, and he was a regulatory by training. He was an expert in foreign investment review, but he was a very good business developer and had lots of contacts and brought business in. In the middle of the dinner, he disappears, and then half an hour later, he comes back with 3 cases of beer, and he starts handing them out. He goes, "This is fresh off the line." I'm like, "What's this?" And John, with a business partner of his, founded the Upper Canada Brewing Company. Okay. So this is back in 1984, and so he started telling us about how this guy Frank Heaps, who was his business partner, had been involved in a startup on Granville Island of this microbrewery, and that this would be, a great thing for Toronto. So they came to Toronto and they got some money. They raised some money, including from McMillan lawyers, in order to fund this venture, and basically become a craft brewery. And at the time, if you actually wanted to brew beer, you needed to have a brewery. You needed to actually, invest capital and build a brewery. So they did. So actually, when I started at the firm, I sought this guy out because I thought he'd be good to work for, and he was happy to give me opportunities. And, I started doing legal work for Upper Canada, including researching whether or not we could sell beer from the brewery on a statutory holiday or not, or they were, printing up merch and they would have the Upper Canada UCBC logo on it. And they started putting it on infant onesies and like, is that advertising the minors? Are you able to do that? There's always something that was going on. And so, so I, was exposed to that. And then I started, when I was in my securities rotation as a student, I started working for a guy who straddled both corporate and securities. And named Chris Loughran, who was an excellent lawyer. But Chris and a business partner owned the Canadian franchise rights to something called Mary Brown's Fried Chicken.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
And so he ran this business on the side of his desk while he was practicing law.
Wow.
So I just thought this is what lawyers did.
Yeah.
Right. And so, anyways, I figured, oh, well, when I grow up and, I'm a real lawyer, then, maybe something will come about.
Yeah.
And so a couple of people who were involved in Upper Canada, so Upper Canada grew and went public and it got privatized and it got sold off to Sleeman's. There was a couple of young guys who were involved in it, decided that they wanted to start another venture. And they were going to call it, because they all got fired from Sleeman's because they had the wrong last names. They actually were going to call it 3FG, Three Fired Guys Brewery. And that's that's how Steam Whistle started.
Wow.
And so they came and they approached some of the people who had been investors in Upper Canada. I got invited to a meeting and said, do you want to invest in this? And I'm like, well, how does it work? And they said, well, it's a startup. And so it's going to lose money for the next 3 years. And so, of course, I'm in my early 30s and I'm like, I'm going to give you money and you're going to lose it? It's like, yeah, but it's okay because we set it up as a limited partnership. So that if in fact, if you lose money, it's a benefit because you've got income as a lawyer and you can take these losses and write them off against your income. And then, when we get profitable, we'll turn it into a corporation so that you're not being allocated profit because we're not going to pay you out the profit. It's going to have to be reinvested in the business to grow it. Anyways, I took a leap and I wrote them a check and I was an investor in Upper Canada or in Steam Whistle for about 20 years. And that, that became an interest, a passion. And like I enjoyed going to the shareholder meetings and, participating in it and it just helped me understand business better.
Did you enjoy the Pilsner before you invested in it?
Yeah.
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 Are you still partial to it?
I do. I do enjoy the product. And not that I'm a big drinker. I used to joke with people, particularly as you're raising young kids, you can't afford to have a hangover. But people would ask me, you want to drink? I said, no, I don't drink, which is kind of odd for a guy who's got an investment in a brewery.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, so another thing that we want to do is kind of like, humanize you guys. So like we've talked a lot about your career, what you do in M&A. Tell us a little bit about your personal life. So like I heard from Alex, you have a family.
Yep.
You have kids. Just kind of go over that. And then we also want to ask as a follow-up, do you find it challenging with Bay Street hours and the work commitments? Because it's notoriously demanding career, right?
Well, it's, yeah. So the key is you use the term career. Okay. So, and that's fundamentally, everybody has to make their own decisions as to whether you want to have a job that you check in and check out at, or whether you want to have a career, which is a bigger investment. Okay. Yeah. And nobody tells you in law school, like nobody ever told me that, oh, and by the way, if you do this Bay Street thing and you're actually good at it, and then one day you become a partner, you're actually a business owner. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's, the other side of this is that once I became a partner in this place, I realized that, I spend usually half my days devoted to running a business here, right? This is a follow-up to your question, and I will get to yours. But, as a business owner, we employ 800 people, and they rely on you for pay their mortgages and, their kids' braces and things like that. And there's some pressure on you. And that within the partnership itself, not everybody, has the skill set to actually contribute the same way towards running that business.
Yeah.
So it tends to fall on, a smaller subset, and they aren't all business lawyers, but a lot of them are business lawyers in terms of running it. Like we have a corporate structure. We have a managing partner, CEO, who also reports to a board. And, over the course of my time here, I've pretty much done every job from being involved in student recruiting and associate, management and partnership admission and marketing partner and, client development stuff. And, it's, section leader of the corporate group, on the board of partners, chair of the board of partners, running allocation, which is, once a year you have to sit down and say, got the pizza. How big of a piece of pizza does Mike get versus, the other people, which is a really hard job.
I can imagine.
And it takes a lot of work, a lot of prep. Okay. So, so I decided early on when I decided to stay, which was, when did I decide to stay? When did I give up my dream of going to do the international MBA? Was when I got offered partnership, right? And so back then it was different. And after 6 years, I was offered the opportunity to join the equity partnership straight in, no, two-tier structure. And so I took it. And so I was 32 years old. And so, I had gotten married the year before. My wife was a practicing lawyer at the time. And so that was, we got introduced on a blind date. I was trying to ask her, the woman who was her roommate, who actually worked here, out on a date. And she's like, go away. Never going to happen. But since you got nothing to do on Saturday night, you can take my roommate out on a date.
That's funny.
We've been married
for hilarious, actually.
been married for 33 years, right? So, and she practiced for about 10. And then after she was an environmental litigator. And then she went in-house thinking that would be, more balance for her because we decided to start a family. Mm-hmm. But she went in-house, and because she did environmental assessment hearings, there wasn't any balance. If she was on a hearing, she could be away for 3 weeks at a time. And so even though she, the thought of, well, it'll be a more, an easier life, you have to really think these things through.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so anyways, we've 2 kids who are soon to be 30 this year. Our son and daughter is 28. They both went to business school like their dad, and they both said, no way am I going to law school because we don't want your life. Just, they wanted to do different things. And my daughter's in philanthropy, loves her job, works for the Weston family, and, is really, happy with what she does. And my son is a data analyst who was with Red Bull for 6 years and then recently, changed jobs about 3 weeks ago. And so he's married happily, to a lovely girl that he met when he was at St. FX. And, my daughter's a Queen's Commie, and, they growing up, it was, we as a, my wife and I as partners decided that she would stay home after the second child was born and man things on the home front.
Yeah.
Okay. And, that's, that's a difficult decision.
Yeah.
In fact, somebody gave me an article one time that said that, read this article, and it basically said it was about the woman's brain as opposed to the lawyer's brain. And they said, if you take, you take an educated woman who has had level of financial independence and all of a sudden, enters into a matrimonial relationship in which she's told, you are now, stay-at-home mom.
Yeah.
It goes one of two ways, right? It can go one path, which is, she embraces the new opportunity and she, like everything else she's done in her life, becomes the best at it and develops her culinary skills and her, her parenting skills and and her partner values this and she feels valued and it's all good. Or it could go this way where she feels like she's been demoted to the level of domestic servant, put into a job she was never trained for. She never took home ec in her life. Somebody has to pay for this. Right?
Yeah.
So anyway, there's always a period of adjustment to this, but, we worked through it. And it turned out, for our family to be the right thing to do. And, we then were met with some parental health issues, challenges with aging parents who have all passed now.
Mm-hmm.
But, we had a lot of years where we were that sandwich generation between trying to raise young kids and deal with aging parents. And, the reason I was able to, focus on my career was because she was carrying that load.
Yeah.
And so it was, it was something that was team sport. That being said, I coached my son's hockey teams. I never missed, a game. I just, prioritized things at different night, went on family vacations and, I worked hard. It's easier to do now because of with the technology, back then it was easier and harder, but back then you could disconnect because once you got on that plane, nobody could get you anywhere, right? So, on the one hand, you can stay in contact. On the other hand, like you do need to set your priorities.
Do you have any advice for people bent on making it work? Do you guys just talk about everything to make sure that you're always on the same page, or?
Yeah, and you're not always on the same page, and there's give and take in it, but I don't know.
Do you think it was easier because she was also from law, that she almost understood where you were coming from?
To a degree, except she practiced law at a different time.
Okay.
Okay, so she practiced law pre-internet.
Yeah.
And so couldn't understand, why are you looking at your phone all the time?
Yeah.
Like it was foreign to her. Like the legal it was 180 degree shift from what she had. So, that being said,
and you were kind of unique in that you practiced in that day and age as well, but then you've seen it come around. Like you spoke earlier about how you went into an egg-shaped room and that was a typewriter that was computerized, and you saw the internet come through, you saw the wide access to information, you talked about how you couldn't find out about the LSAT outside of a little booklet, whereas now we analyzed the crap out of that exam before we ever wrote it.
Exactly.
And so now you're seeing on the other side, AI creeping in, right? Like me and Alex were having a conversation in the lobby while we were waiting, and I was telling him, like, Bay Street firms, when you see them in movies, one of the things you see is like the classic document dump. Well, they'll give you like 1 million files, and it's you're dealing with a smaller firm, and they don't have the manpower to go through all these, and that's not a factor anymore with AI. You could just point the thing at 1 million files, and it'll tell you which ones are important or which ones.
Yeah, we're not quite there yet.
Right? Of course, right? But that's like I'm looking beyond the horizon.
No, I mean it is coming.
It's gonna come in and become more prevalent. So could you just comment on that, or like what are your thoughts on that transition?
No, and it's you're right. I was the first lawyer at McMillan to have a computer on my desk.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
And the day it showed up, this boss I've been talking about, Peter, comes in and goes, "What do you have that for?" I said, "So I can use it." And his comment was, "So does that mean I have to buy you a bottle of Chanel for your Christmas bonus like I do the girls?" I'm like, sure. It wasn't 2 hours later when his secretary had gone home that he's in my office saying, "Do you actually know how to use that thing? Yeah. Can you just change this one line in this letter?" "Yeah, I can." I did. He goes, "Oh, wow. Okay. That's pretty good."
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it's not a toy.
Never made any more disparaging comments about my computer. So you've touched on a topic that, is a very important one, and in terms of your generation, okay? Because my generation, so yes, we didn't have, things were at a slower pace, okay? But it allowed you to breathe and it allowed you to learn. And so I cut my teeth doing due diligence by reading hundreds, if not thousands of contracts, okay? And people would say, "Well, you're doing due diligence and you enjoy it?" I'm kind of like, I don't know, maybe it's my dirty little secret, but I'm getting paid to read contracts and to learn. And so I read 5 different leases looking at assignment provisions. And I'm like, okay, that's clear and unambiguous. I like that one. This one, I can't figure out which way it works. This one could be better, like this one better. And so when I then had to draft an assignment provision, I knew which one to go to.
Yeah.
Right. And you multiply that by 1,000 in terms of different things that you learned in the process of doing diligence, dog work, like, basic level stuff. But that's how we trained. Okay. And again, like there wasn't we now have a software system called Kira, whereby you you scan your contracts in, and it will analyze the assignment provisions for you and produce a report, which is a really good first cut. Yeah. You still have to go back and look at it, okay? But it's a really good first cut, and it is only going to get better. But what does that eliminate in the process? It eliminates the ability for you guys to learn the way I did.
Yeah. Okay. Because you're almost penalized for it at this point. You're like sinking all these hours and stuff, but that's the only way.
Well, it just means the firms have to figure out a way to train you differently.
Yeah.
Okay. It doesn't mean, oh, too bad for you guys. You're never going to become good corporate lawyers because you're not going to have you weren't trained the way the cavemen were, like me, right? The firms but you also need to understand this. You also need to understand that you need to take control of your own careers, right? Like nobody's going to spoon feed you and basically just take you and sit you down and say, my job is to, in the next 5 years, turn you into mini-me, okay?
Yeah.
You need to show initiative. You need to, basically invest in yourself, and in your spare time, grab 10 contracts and read them.
Yeah.
And ask people and say, hey, where can I want to work on an M&A deal. Where can I find the firm's precedent share purchase agreement? And you go and you get it and you read it, and you read it from back to front and front to back until you actually start to understand it. And you ask questions. Why is this? Why is this? Why, what does this really mean? What time is of the essence? What the hell is that? It's in every one of these things. What's it actually mean? Yeah. And you realize it's in every one of these because there is a legal, definition of what that means. Mm-hmm. You can say time is of the essence as opposed to writing a paragraph about, why things need to be done in a timely manner.
The best advice you gave me was on the note on going with the idea about reading the 10 contracts, also just reading a newspaper or an online version of the Wall Street Journal or something, so that you are at least aware with day-to-day affairs that you probably should have an awareness from, but also that you might be able to take something from. So that's something that's been in the past few months extremely useful to me. And also you make yourself almost more interesting. You could talk to more people about more things. So
yeah, it's exactly right. And that's learning the business side of it. Exactly right. Is that you need to learn the lawyer technical stuff.
Yeah.
And as a young business lawyer, or businessman who has a law degree.
Yeah.
Like if you don't read the Business Corporations Act from front to cover, like 10 times, like, you're setting yourself up to embarrass yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Because, I've had situations with lawyers on the other side of the table who were like fighting me over something. I'm like, can we just open the act?
Yeah.
Right here. Yeah. You still want to fight about this? Oh, okay. I didn't know that was there. You've been practicing for 20 years and you didn't know it was there. Okay. So, you do the legal technical stuff, and then the other stuff is what, I do in my spare time, right? So, yes, I live in Oakville, so I commute on the train. I got 45 minutes of commuting each day. What do? I read the National Post, I read Harvard Business Review. I read The Economist, just because I find it interesting.
Yeah.
In terms of, you say, to be interesting, yeah, you'll be interesting to certain people, and they'll be the people that you want to be interesting to because they're the people who are going to hire you to do stuff, right? You might not get invited to a lot of cocktail parties by the arts crowd, but that's okay. They can have their parties.
That's funny. So flipping it around now to us, what is it that you think makes for articling students who excel the most? Or is there anything that you look for from the students that really stands out to you?
Yeah. So the students that stand out to me are the ones who show the initiative, okay, and who show that they understand and that they appreciate the opportunity that's being given to them. Because when you're starting out, your clients, are the lawyers in the firm who have work to give, assignments to give. That's how you're going to prove yourself. So you're going to show what you know. That's how you're going to learn more. So getting those assignments is key. So how do you get the assignments? One, you make yourself known, right? And you don't, You don't go to the busy lawyer's office at 11 in the morning when they're juggling 15 things and say, hi, you know,
Yeah.
I'm here. How do you, can we chat? It's like you go first thing in the morning, late in the afternoon when things are, you know, a little bit less, you know, hectic, or you bump into them in the elevator and say, would we be able to have coffee for, you know, half an hour? So showing that initiative. The other key thing is to show that, you know, you, so Jim Durham, who I mentioned, the most valuable thing he taught me was we did a role-playing exercise, one of these Saturday morning training sessions. He goes, Mike, okay, so I'm going to do role-playing with you. Okay, fine. So, who's your best client? Dave. Okay. I'm Dave. I'm calling you. You're at your desk. Okay. Ring, ring, ring. Pick up the phone. Mike Whitcombe. Mike, it's your best client, Dave. How are you? Good. Busy. Yep, busy. Okay, good talking to you. Click. And he hangs up. Like, what the hell was that? He goes, I'm Dave, your best client. I was just phoning you with the transaction that's going to transform your career. It's the biggest transaction I'm ever going to do. And I want to ensure I've got 100% of you because you're my guy. And you've just told me you're too busy to take it on. So I'm going to phone the next lawyer that I know. So from that point forward, I eliminated that, you know, and it's the standard response in the legal industry, right? You ask, you know, 8 out of 10 people, how are you? Good, I'm busy, right? Because if you're not busy, you must be crap, right? Like and even if people aren't busy, they're going to say they're busy. So as an articling student, you do not want to say you're busy. You want to say, you know, how can I help you? Is there something I can help you with? And then you manage the process and say, what's your timing, right? What's your timing? Because you do need to deliver. Don't take on too much and not deliver, but at least, you know, more times than not, like I'll just go on to the next person because they'll basically say, like I'll ask somebody how you are, you know, thinking I've got something to assign, and they'll just say, well, I'm busy because, you know, I want to show that people think that I'm, you know, the next coming of, you know, superstar lawyer. So, and the other thing is, if you walk around looking like you're under pressure and you're carrying the burden of the firm on your shoulders, right? Like we all went through it. Nobody dies during articling. And so, you know, if you look like you're going to break under the pressure, I'm not going to give you more work. I don't want to be the straw that breaks your back. Right? So there's a guy who's just made partner here, who's a good Queen's Law grad, Sean Coughlin. I remember he was sitting across the hall from me when he was a student, and he just had a smile on his face all the time. He's like, how are you? He goes, you know, how's your day? How's it going? It's good. Anything I can help you with? So anyways, I started loading them up with stuff, and, you know, I was like, and there's, you know, I'd have another thing, and I'm like, I'm not sure. Sean's doing an awful lot for me. Maybe I should, I'll just give it to him. Can you do this? Oh yeah, I can take it on. And then, you know, guy next door to me was also very busy, comes to my office and goes, Sean's a workhorse. I'm just pounding him. I'm like, you're pounding him. I'm pounding him. And everything got done on time, and everything got done with a smile on his face. And he's like, just give me more, right? Like this is, and he, you know, he was working long and hard, and, you know, just got through it. And it's like, and he would say to us, thanks very much for that opportunity. I learned something, you know, and he was also good about, you know, asking for feedback and this, you know, right then and, you know, is there anything I can do better? Like I want to improve, as opposed to waiting 3 months when a formal review process goes through and, you know, somebody says yay or nay, or maybe you should have something better. Right. Yeah. So, you know, again, just keeping in mind that, you know, most firms, you know, want their people to succeed. They want to set them up for success, right? There's more self-inflicted wounds in this business, and it's only because maybe we don't spend enough time telling people that, right? But basically just trying to convince, like, relax. Hopefully you find a professional home where you feel comfortable, that you like the people, you like the environment, and that you feel supported, right? And that you're not walking on eggshells, right? And that, you know, it's not one strike and you're out. And if you make make one mistake, and you're going to make mistakes, everybody makes mistakes. I still make mistakes. and it's just when it happens, you own up to it and you work through it, and you get back on track. Making the same mistake twice, not as good, right? But like I say, just relax and breathe and just work hard. Again, like you've got one chance. Yeah. I mean, you got a summer period and then an articling period to prove yourself.
Yeah.
And so you go into that, and if you you come to Bay Street, coming back to the career versus job, if you come to Bay Street saying, I'm looking for a job, then, you may or may not get a job.
Yeah.
But if you come to him saying, this is my one chance to create optionality, that I might be offered an opportunity to continue here, I'm going to work hard. I'm just going to prioritize this. I can take vacation when it's over, and I'm just going to, I'm just going to work as hard as I can.
Yeah.
Because that's there's the defined timeline you have to prove yourself.
That really is, I mean, the best advice that we could take away. We could end it with this. Is there anything looking back that you wish you had done differently or that you regret at all? And looking forward, if there was one thing that you could point to that you're most excited for, what would that be?
Yeah, I really don't have any regrets. I mean, I've been very fortunate in terms of joining a firm that provided me with unlimited opportunities to grow and build something for myself.
Yeah. Which
I had to do. And there were scary times along the way where, you're invested in a client and they're taking 75% of your time, and you get the phone call saying, hey, Mike, great news, we're selling. Okay. Yeah, that's really great news, right?
Yeah.
But then, you eventually, get comfort in the fact that you know what you're doing, and that there'll be somebody else, and that there's ebbs and flows. There's kind of a life cycle to being a lawyer. But, I had ample opportunities to leave this place, and I always looked around and said, I like the people. I like
There's nowhere else I'd rather
I like
be.
my partners. Why create myself, pain by going and trying to prove yourself someplace else? Because again, it's a team sport, and that if you find people operating in silos and basically saying, do my work, don't do anybody else's work, you got to question that. Right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you find an environment that's supportive and that, we all assimilate to the culture that we're in, right? Like if we've had people come in who are really smart, but actually had different mindsets, and we're just, you couldn't have a conversation with them unless they won.
Yeah.
And that not only won, there's blood on the carpet. It's like, what, you might actually be better off across the street someplace, right?
Yeah.
And so, just find your place. And in terms of the future, I mean, I think it's, there's lots of, this industry isn't going away.
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned the AI thing, and, adopt it. As a young lawyer, ensure that your computer skills are highly developed.
Mm-hmm.
Learn how to use Excel. Get comfortable using software programs, because as a young lawyer, you will be manipulating a lot of data, and more in very short order, you'll be, working with these software programs and these AI programs.
Yeah.
At the same time, keeping your eye, out there for figuring out, how am I going to develop, this depth of legal knowledge that I need to develop in order to be, to be able to draft a contract from scratch. I mean, I still get asked, I say, okay, Mike, we need a contract to do this, and there's no contract in our database of thousands and thousands of contracts that fits, that you actually have to go back to first principles, right? But, there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about what I learned in contracts law, because that's what I do. So
I will say, for me personally, I'll speak for myself. Sitting across from you, you are in many ways who I hope to become. So I just want to thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Yeah. Well, it's my pleasure. Look,
yeah.
Queen's Law water bottle.
Queen's Law sticks together.
No. That's exactly what I said to you, that Queen's Law sticks together. And if I could help, if anybody who's watching this gets even one kernel that helps them be successful in law school or in ArtiClean or in their practice, then we've done good work here today.
I think your insight is completely invaluable.
I think this is going to be very, very helpful for many people.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. I know you came to me, you came to Toronto. It's a long haul for you, but
well worth it. That's
well worth it. It was our pleasure.
It was my pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. All right.